Hello, my name is Jim Savage, and today I'll be interviewing Mr. Paul Taylor, who is a Senate candidate for the Fraser Anning Conservative National Party. This is the first of a series of interviews we will be doing, and I would like to say welcome, Mr. Taylor, and thank you for coming in today.
Thank you, Jim. It's a pleasure.
Mr. Paul Taylor, you are the Fraser Anning Conservative National Party Senate candidate for Queensland. Welcome and thank you for coming along today. Can I ask you first up, why are you running for Mr. Fraser Anning's party?
Thank you, Jim. I'm his running mate on this ticket. And why am I running for it? I'm concerned about the way the country is going. And when I've looked at Fraser's policies, and I've looked at his voting record, and the two of them lined up, they ticked all the boxes that are important to me. And when it came to same-sex marriage, Fraser voted against it. When it came to euthanasia, he voted against it. Abortion, against it. And as you know, Fraser's one who's got a very strong stand. Holding the future of our children is very important, and he's got to stand against Islam and Muslim immigration. And his record on that is rock solid. Whatever Fraser says and what he does ticks every box, and to me that gives him credibility, it gives him authority, he's authentic.
So, Mr. Taylor, what you are saying sounds very much to me like a very Christian-based guideline that you are espousing here. Would that be the case?
Absolutely. We are a Judean Christian country. Our laws are built on the Bible, Judean Christian laws. You go back a few years ago, someone who was involved in same-sex, it was outlawed. Now, it was against the law. It's just because people have moved on from that, it doesn't mean to say that we lose our values. And some of us, people like me and many millions in this country, still hold to those values and what we believe is right for the country and the best thing for the country. And they are biblical principles, and I'm very comfortable with it.
So I guess what a lot of people would be thinking watching you here now, you're a man with brown skin, you are of Indian heritage, you are now obviously a proud Aussie citizen. I guess a lot of people would be asking, why is this man with this obvious skin tone the running mate of a man who has been much maligned in recent times and even branded a white supremacist, or has been branded with the accusation that certain white supremacists like him? So guilt by association, it would seem, but what are your thoughts on that? Because I'm sure everybody would love to know.
Well, when I hear those names being thrown out, the first thing that I do is I want to research it. And in doing my research, I found it to be absolutely and totally baseless. And I'm also well aware that when people cannot actually defend themselves in an argument, they then resort to name calling. And that is the classic weapon that the left uses. Tragically, some in the right also use that, and when they use it, it's only because they're threatened by Fraser. And the threat that Fraser poses to them is only the truth. And because he's speaking the truth, he's referencing and calling upon what this nation stood for as recently as 20 years ago. We've got records in Hansard in Parliament where they've talked about the danger of immigration to this country, and when we bring in people who cannot assimilate, who refuse to assimilate, who refuse to integrate, and this is recorded in Parliament in Hansard.
Are you saying that Hansard has quoted Parliament as saying 20 years ago that we have an issue with Islamic immigration?
Not specifically directly stating Islamic immigration, but it's not difficult to draw on it. In fact, I've got it right here in my hand. This is Hansard from June of 1998. This is what it actually says. It says, we moved from a policy of assimilation to multiculturalism. And with that came an explosion of bringing in people into this country who just refuse to assimilate, refuse to integrate, and in so doing, what they're doing is they're actually diluting the very laws and the heritage of this nation. And rather than these people assimilating and integrating into what the home they've longed to come into, our laws are being watered down, our heritage is being destroyed, our culture is being thrown out to accommodate this very small minority.
So if I may interrupt for a moment, somebody watching this interview now might say, well, you're a black man who've come from another country, and here you are talking about being careful about who will enter the country. They might say, well, you're a hypocrite. How would you respond to that?
Oh, great question. Colour has nothing to do with it. I've married a white woman. It's my belief, our Judean Christian laws. I'm a Christian. I have no issue at all with our Judean Christian laws. I respect our flag. I love the anthem. I love the culture. I enjoy the heritage of this nation. And everything that's in here lines up with everything that I stand for and believe in. The colour of the skin does not change my attitude or my appreciation for this country. If anything, I appreciate this country so much. That's the reason why I came in here and why I want to protect what this country's given to me.
I guess this would be a similar kind of sentiment to Martin Luther King's in regard to not caring of the skin colour, but more the content of the character. Is this the gist of what you're saying?
Precisely. See, the colour of the skin is what's on the outside, but the actions of the person determines the true colour of the heart.
Point taken, but I guess the fact remains is that Islamic immigration is occurring throughout the Western world in unprecedented numbers. It is a fact of life. Do you believe there is are you suggesting, from your point of view, that we need to curtail Islamic immigration in this country? We've had most of our immigrants to this country have been from Islamic countries, either illegally or legally, but the fact is that the majority that end up here have come from Islamic countries. And do you have any fears that they will not assimilate and become dinky-die Aussies like you and I with the backyard barbecue, or do you believe that's not to be the case?
Well, just look at the history of look at the history of Islamic immigration. Look at Birmingham in the United Kingdom.
What exactly are you referring to there?
Well, you look at the concentration of Muslim immigration in Birmingham. You wouldn't recognise Birmingham today as an English town, as an English part of another county in Britain. You'd think you're in Pakistan. Now, I've got nothing against the Pakistanis, but if you come into this country, and this is where we see the abject failure of multiculturalism. Multiculturalism is where these people, where we come in as an immigrant. Now, I as an immigrant came in from India. I haven't brought with me my turban and everything else that goes with some people from different parts of India. And I haven't set up in an enclave and stayed and stuck only with Indian people and then demanded that you change the laws in your country to accommodate me because you're being insensitive to me. And that's precisely what's happened now in Birmingham. You've got mosques all over the place, loudspeakers bursting out with their prayers and their calls in the morning and different times of the day, something that is not the norm in the West. Now, if you want to come into this country, we've got to live by the laws that are in this country. We've got to be sensitive to the country we've come to. We don't want them to be sensitive to us. If you're going to find what's in this country insensitive and offensive to you, then why did you come to this country?
I guess a lot of people are saying, especially from the Greens and from the Labor Party and some of the softer sections of the Liberal Party, that we should adjust and that we should accept different cultures into our country and accept some of their cultural beliefs. And obviously the one that probably most people would talk about would be Sharia law. Do you believe there is any capacity in our society, or should we have any capacity to accept perhaps Sharia law just in Muslim areas and not subject the Christians to it, but allow the Muslims to practice Sharia law in their own areas if it doesn't affect the rest of us? Do you think that's an acceptable solution?
Well, if Sharia law was so great, why did they leave the country where they've got it in operation? Most of them flee it, and they come here. Why do they come here? Why do they want to now install it in the new country? When you come into this country, we need to change the immigration focus here, and it's very easy. It can be done very easily. The people need to know in advance that if you come to Australia, these are the laws we have in this country, and they're non-negotiable because you are asking to come to this country. If you don't like the laws that Australia has in this country, Australia has. If you don't like the laws, you don't like the lifestyle, you don't like the freedom of speech, you don't like our Judean Christian laws, you don't like our anthem, you don't like our flag, well, then this is the country you don't come to. You need to go to a country where they've got everything that really ticks all the boxes in your life. You come into Australia, You don't come in here and form another country within a country. This is Australia. If you can't assimilate, you can't integrate, well then, we enjoy your food. We enjoy the food that you bring in with you. We enjoy the dresses you wear and the costumes you wear, just so long as it's not a security risk. We enjoy the language you want to talk amongst yourselves. But we have our laws. If you drive through a red light, you get a ticket for it. We've got our laws here. If you rape somebody, there's a very heavy penalty for it. If you get involved in, in marrying a daughter off under force, forcing her to marry somebody else, we've got laws against that. It's not acceptable in this country.
So that's a no to Sharia law, I guess.
Absolutely, there's no to Sharia law.
But look, that's all fine and good, but how are you going to possibly manage an immigration policy that is going to prevent these sorts of things from happening? Obviously, we can't have a law that says, well, I don't know, I'm asking you, are you saying we have an immigration policy that says blanket, no Muslims allowed? Because that would be, in most people's eyes, extremely discriminating. So are you saying no to Muslims if they want to apply, if you're Islamic, you don't bother applying? Is that what you're saying?
Well, there's one way to get around this.
How's that? I'd love to hear that one.
We can do it very clinically. When people apply to come to this country, we've got to fill in these thick forms, a thick pile of immigration form, application form. Have a cover note on it, and ask the question: do you have an issue with the Australian flag? Does the Australian anthem offend you? People in Australia, some of them have dogs as pets, some have piglets as pets. Do you find that offensive? Does it offend you? Do you have an issue that you can't force your daughter to marrying anybody else? If your children want to convert to a different religion, you can't stop them. You can do nothing about it. Because in Australia we have freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and freedom of choice. If your daughter decides to throw off the costume she's been wearing in the country she's come from and decides to dress like an Australian and cut her hair and do what she wants to, you can't stop it. So if these people have issues with that, then at first base we screen them without them even filling out the application form. And if they say they don't have an issue with any of those things, then quite clearly they have no issue with our laws, our customs, our heritage, which they will respect. And if they then turn around and say, well, they do have problems with it, we've then got grounds to remove them from the country. All I say is, and we say as a party is, if you want to come and live in this country, you will respect and appreciate the history of this country, the heritage of this country, the culture of this country, and everything that this great country has to offer you.
You mentioned earlier Hansard in 1998, I believe?
1998.
Are you saying that Hansard specifically foresaw these issues coming? I didn't quite understand what you're referring to when you mentioned, you held up the Hansard there of 1998. Can you explain exactly what you're referring to? I didn't quite understand the message there. What was Hansard saying back in 2 decades ago?
I'll read it for you. This is what it exactly says. Hansard, 22nd to 25th of June 1998. The policy of multiculturalism replaced the policy of assimilation. A very significant shift. This has led to an explosive mixture of migrants where we now have an outbreak of crime and violence unparalleled in Australia's history. That was 20 years ago. Fast track. What have we now got happening in Victoria with the Sudanese gangs? What have we got happening in Lakemba? You can literally circle Lakemba off as a different country. Why? We were warned. It's not as though Enoch Powell warned us in 1968. We were warned in our own parliament in 1998. And we've done nothing about it. I can understand the weak leadership in this country. And we're talking here about the future of our children.
Well, that was in the time of the Prime Ministership of John Howard, I believe. So are you saying that the Liberals have done nothing to address this problem or to even heed their own warnings? Are you accusing them of not following their own advice? Is that what you're saying?
Well, the evidence is overwhelming. It's the people they've let into the country that's brought this about. The advice was there, the information was there, but they've done nothing about it. And I can't understand why they've not addressed this. And we're talking about the future of our own children. The imam from the mosque in Sydney has recently made a statement. We know that they're very close to the Labour Party. They vote in a bloc for Labour and the Greens. 15 federal members of Parliament, Labour federal members of Parliament, owe their seats to the bloc Muslim vote. I mean, this is the danger facing the country. We've got many, many more millions of Christians in this country, but there's no members in federal Parliament that owe their seats in Parliament to the Christian vote.
Well, we recently had a massacre in Christchurch, New Zealand, of course, which we all know, where a man who has been described as a white supremacist has murdered 50-odd innocent Muslim worshippers. I think everybody would have to agree that that was disgusting and atrocious and unforgivable at every possible level, an act of terrorism. We then had, in short time after that, a very large massacre conducted in Sri Lanka against Christians, this time on Easter Sunday, of all times, the most holy day of Christianity, one would argue. Do you see any parallels between these? One was Muslims killed by a man, I don't know if he was a Christian or not, and then the people that were killed in Sri Lanka by obviously a very planned and well organised attack by Islamic extremists and a large number of men at that. Do you see any parallels between these two instances? Or one can say, well, they did it, so it's all right for the other to do it, or vice versa. Do you see any parallels between these two incidences at all, and how do you see these instances, and how would you explain what's going on here?
Now, what the guy did in New Zealand, condemn it at every level. Totally unacceptable. While I'm opposed to Muslim immigration to this country, at the same time killing anybody, taking any life is totally unacceptable. I have no room for what he did. What little I've read of him, and in reading that, what little I have read of him, my mind was immediately drawn to Enoch Powell's speech in 1968 on Rivers of Blood. Now, while this guy was an Australian, but the act and what he did followed, I think he drew on that from Enoch Powell's speech. Now, I actually agree with part of Enoch Powell's speech, not all of it. I disagree with everything he talks about colour, because I'm a coloured person living in a white man's country. Yes. So, and I've been a contributor to this economy, and I continue to employ people while I'm in my own business. So, but the part he talked about was where if the government and the politicians don't listen to what the people are saying, then people will rise up and will take it into their own hands. And that, I think, is what this idiot did in New Zealand. Totally unacceptable. He didn't need to go there. But that, I drew a parallel from there. Now, coming to Sri Lanka was something totally different. Now, the guy in New Zealand did it as from a race point of view. The one in Sri Lanka is totally different, because that is from an ideology where it is actually the Islam in its form, in its purest form, advocates that sort of action. Because the Quran is the authority for the evil they perpetrate. And when they did it, they didn't do it in the name of Buddha or Krishna. They did it in the name of Allah. Everywhere around the world we see this happen. The authority for their behavior is the Quran. So when I hear people say, well, it's un-Islamic, they're basically lying to us. Because the Quran itself, in Quran 2, 191 to 193 says, when you go and talk to somebody about Allah, and if they do not convert, then you are to kill them. And that's exactly what these people are doing. They didn't give them an opportunity. They didn't go and talk to them about Allah. Around the world, this is what's happening. Now, the epitome of that verse from Quran 2, 191 to 193 is you go to Medina. All those centuries ago, Medina was a Jewish city. How many Jews live in Medina today?
I don't know.
There's none. There's no Jews in Medina today. What happened? I mean, in the city of Nazareth, where Jesus was born in Nazareth, there are very few Christians in Nazareth today because of the population of the Palestinians. Because wherever they go, this is exactly what takes place. They move the people out so that they can take over the place and then want to bring in their own laws. We've seen this happen even in the Philippines. So what happened in Sri Lanka had nothing to do with race, because Islam is not a race. And when I hear people calling Islam a race, or when they call Fraser a racist, I wonder, and I scratch my head and wonder, what are these people up to? And I wonder what our media is doing on this. See, our media has the opportunity, and they're actually in a position to advocate and to expose what is incorrect and what is wrong. We don't hear them talking about Islam and saying Islam is not a race. Islam is an ideology. If Islam was a race, then I'd put it to you this way. Do you like the ideology of Nazism?
No, I don't think anybody would say they do.
So, well, given that you say you do not like Nazism, I now deduce from that you do not like German people, which makes you a racist. Oh, that's absolutely foolish. It's a stupid argument, and that's precisely what is being perpetrated by the media in not calling out and exposing Islam for what it is. And when you oppose Islam, you're not a racist. You're just exposing an ideology that is totally anathema to everything that we stand for and that we take for granted and believe in this country. And that's the difference.
Mr. Taylor, if we can step aside from Islam for a moment, I know it's been an issue that the media have highlighted in regards to Senator Annin, and I guess one can understand it in the public in this day and age. It's a very, very touchy subject, particularly in the West for some reason, where we are very loath to discuss issues with Islam because it is considered racist, as you just said, which of course I think we all know there is no race called Islam. But immigration issues aside, we have a lot of other problems in this country, and I believe that your party that you are running for do have some other policies and some other ideas to get this country moving. Obviously, unemployment is a major issue. The huge presence of China in ownership of our land and our business is frequently mentioned by another minor party who's been doing a lot of advertising in this country recently. What are your thoughts on some of these issues? Put the immigration issue aside, which is one of many issues, but on nation building and our society in general and the well-being, jobs, future for our children, what plans or visions do you have for Australia?
One of the great policies that Fraser Anning's party's got is to drought-proof this nation. Now, as a migrant to this country, but also someone who enjoys economics, I've looked and I consciously look at what's been happening with this nation, the total destruction of our car industry. We look at the farmers, what the farmers are going through with so much of drought. When I look at from 1985 to this very day, when I sit back and I look at what major infrastructure has the governments from Labour and Liberal in all these decades, what have they actually put in place? Something of significance. A major shift, where they've actually shifted gears from mediocrity to something of excellence. I could only find three major things that have actually been brought about. One was the floating of the Australian dollar by the Hawke Labor government. The second was the wages accord, again by the Hawke government, to control wages, which were just going out of control. And the third was the introduction of the GST by the Howard government. Those are three major initiatives for the country that have actually benefited the country significantly. You know, building of hospitals, building of roads, everybody in around the world, they do that. Building hospitals, building roads, building schools, it's a regular need of society. But something of significance. Now, I was really excited when Malcolm Turnbull came into Parliament in 2004, because he was a corporate executive, and at the time I had just come out of corporate management myself. So I was excited. Here's a guy who's going to come in and really bring something of substance to Parliament. Cut the politics out and get into putting something in place to actually take this country forward. 2005, John Howard appointed him to the ministry, and his role was Minister of Environment and Water. Not long after, he came out with a blueprint to drought-proof the nation. At a cost of $60 million, he came out with this blueprint. Because 80% of our rainwater from the north of Queensland washes out into the ocean. And the strategy was to build dams, capture that water, harness it, also build hydroelectric dams, so we can get hydroelectricity from it. We could then pump the water into all of these drought areas, drought-proof the nation, and we could now become the food bowl to Asia. I loved it. It could have been done. Terrific strategy. Unfortunately, the Howard government lost that election, and nothing's happened since. So I looked forward to him when he became Prime Minister. I said, well, hopefully now this guy will put this in place. And unfortunately he didn't. He'd now become a regular politician.
So are you suggesting that your party will do this? Given the opportunity to, in a position to make this happen, will you be doing something like, I mean, we've all heard of the Bradfield scheme or hybrid versions of the Bradfield scheme. Is this what you're alluding to? Precisely.
If we have enough power in Parliament, Fraser's in the Senate as well, if we have the power to do it, this will be our number one policy and it'll be non-negotiable. It'll be non-negotiable to drought-proof this nation. I cannot wrap my head around why we would not do something like this. It was so significant to protect our farmers who are often in struggle street. Our farmers need to be wealthy people. We've got the potential to do it. We can be the food bowl to Asia. Why are our farmers constantly being hit with drought? Why do we have short-term economic policies? Why are the farmers on their knees? Why are they going bankrupt? I can't understand why we don't have long-term policies to put in place to actually protect and enrich this nation. We give so much of money overseas as foreign aid to countries, and some of these countries hate us. So let them hate us for free. Let's use that money and invest it in our own infrastructure here, build these dams and drought-proof the nation. I just can't get over the short-sightedness in policy in this country for decades.
Mr. Taylor, thank you very much. I will make a final closing comment. In your original native country of India, many of your farmers produce 3 crops a year, which we can only dream about in this country. So maybe you could bring some of your native cunning from India and bring some of those agricultural policies to Australia, where we could get even 2 crops here would be an incredible achievement. And thank you very much for joining us today, and we look forward to talking to you in our next talk.
Thank you, Jim.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.